Welcome to the Future 3 podcast.
Boom, 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 boom.
I'm Sean,
I'm Shaylin.
And I'm Cyan.
and we are the Future 3 podcast.
Okay, if you have ever watched Hard Knocks on HBO or quarterbacks and receivers on Netflix and thought, who is actually behind this? How is someone getting this close to these players? How is someone capturing these moments that feel this real? Well, guess what? Today we had that man. He is the senior producer at NFL Films for 19 years. Please welcome to the Future 3 podcast, Mr. Tim Rumpff.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be joining you guys.
Yeah, you have a pretty cool job, I can't lie. I'm excited to talk about it.
I cannot complain at all. I've been very fortunate in my career path for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, before we dive in, I just want to tell you sports media is a world that a lot of us teens want to go into. But honestly, we don't really know how to even enter this world or even what goes on in the day-to-day life behind the scenes. For example, I know you just had to do an editing job, which is pretty spontaneous, but I'm sure it's quite exciting. So, before we dive into that, I want to ask you, when you're watching a game, let's say it's Eagles versus, I don't know, Lions, because that's the jersey he decided to wear today. Um, are you just watching the game hoping it's a competitive game and that it's fun to watch, or do you have that kind of producer mindset going on in the background, kind of critiquing every camera angle and all the different aspects that go into the broadcast?
Yeah, first I gotta say I love the attire today. You guys definitely dressed the part and got me hyped for this interview. So
Thanks.
perfect. Kudos to you guys. But no, I think honestly it's a little bit of both. Where I'm originally from Washington D.C., so I'm a huge Commanders fan. Sorry for the two
Oh.
Eagles fans in the interview. Um, but so when I'm watching that game, that's definitely for enjoyment. But certainly if I'm working on a project like a Hard Knocks or quarterback or receiver or one of those, if I'm following somebody's story throughout the year, I think that's kind of what I find myself more interested in. Certainly, watching just for the enjoyment of the game, but also at the end of the day, we're all storytellers, so we're all looking for that next great story.
Awesome. I feel like I don't know if my whole life revolved around producing. I feel like all day, every day, anything I watch, I'd just be thinking about everything that goes into it. So I mean, that's a pretty cool and unique view of it.
That certainly is a big part of it because, no matter what project you're working on, you're always thinking about the next one, the next great story you can tell. So you're always having your eyes open to figure out, who are new players that you're unaware of that have great stories with their families or their upbringings or something like that. So I'm definitely watching every single game, listening to the announcers, stories that they might bring up, and figuring out, hey, how can I take that to the next level or kind of put my own spin on it?
Yeah, it's kind of like the upbringing of Zach Bond. Like, he was a Saints special teams guy, and he eventually became an all-pro linebacker for the Eagles. It's an amazing story.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about the NFL. I mean, obviously every team has 53 players, so those are 53 unique stories in 30 different cities. So fortunately for me and fortunately everybody at NFL Films, the story possibilities are endless.
Yeah. So before we dive in, I have a really special question for you.
Mhm.
If your life was getting the NFL Films treatment, what would be the title of your film and what song would be playing over the opening scene?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough question. Put me on the spot.
Mhm.
Um, gosh, I think it would be something along the lines of, you know, grinding or something like that. I don't know why that's in my mind right now. It was a lot of hard work early on and kind of just figuring out what my voice is as a storyteller, figuring out what the process is of what it takes really to make a film or a television series. So I think it would have to be something along those lines of just all that hard work that goes into it. And on those lines, I think maybe I have to pull something from Rocky or something and do Eye of the Tiger.
Love
Yeah.
that.
There you go. Philly tie-in right there. Perfect.
Yeah. Rocky walk-up song, theme song. That's sick. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty interesting because I know, like, people in bigger roles, they don't really just it's not instant gratification. It takes a lot of time, a lot of work, and this is a perfect example of it because it's not like you just walked into NFL Films and was like, "I'm gonna be a senior producer right now." You had to work for it, you had to prove yourself, you had to make it known that you were worthy of that job, so you finally got it.
For
So that's
sure.
pretty inspiring.
Yeah, and I have a perfect example of that. So one of the first projects that I was assigned when I first started NFL Films back when I was 23. We had just rebooted Hard Knocks, actually. It was the Kansas City Chiefs year after they had taken, I think, a year or two off. And we have this job, which we call Bin Meister, which is essentially just when all of the footage comes in, there's one person that sits through and kind of has to try to sift everything essentially into different categories. Like, hey, here's scenics of the fields, here's hard hits, here's funny sound bites, just so the producers, which we have about 30 different producers editing on the show, can get that footage. And when they want to edit something quickly, they're able to just kind of identify certain things through logs. But there's that young producer that sits there and kind of organizes it for everybody. But looking at the big picture of everything and saying, hey, one day I would love to be the director out in the field who's actually, calling all the shots and leading all the creative. Like I was saying, it took about 10 years, I think. And 10 years later, I was able to direct my first season with the Cleveland Browns. So I think that's really what it goes into, just being willing to work hard, certainly when you're young, take the jobs that nobody wants and do your best on them and show them what you're capable of doing, show them your work ethic, and then eventually you can kind of get where you want to go.
Yeah, you mentioned taking jobs that people don't really know about, which I feel like is really a big thing for especially your career because you have to kind of make yourself stand out in those opportunities that kind of make you uncomfortable, right?
100%. And yeah, I remember a coworker told me a story one time. I think he went into his year-end review at one point, and at the end of the day, I think someone kind of sat him down and was like, "You have to realize there are thousands and thousands of people out there that would happily take your job without making any kind of demands." And now I say that you should definitely try to push for the things you want to work on and higher salaries and stuff like that. But at the same time, you have to know that every day is a grind, like I was saying, and every day you have to prove your worth and think outside the box and take risks. And that's kind of how you climb that ladder and kind of show people you deserve to get more opportunities.
All right, so let's dive in right into your high school life. So when you were in high school, did you know you loved media or did you discover that later on?
Yeah, so I think it's always been something I was very interested in. The media landscape has definitely changed now from when I was growing up, but I remember when I was a kid, Sports Center in the morning was something that every single person that was interested in sports at least was watching. So I was watching that every day. I love those guys. I think that's what I originally wanted to be, was on-air talent. And that's what I ended up going to college for at Maryland, broadcast journalism. And
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be on air. I always loved films and I love sports. So kind of NFL films seemed like the best way to put those two together. So very fortunate to end up here where I did.
Yeah, for sure. And did you take any extracurriculars or clubs in high school that were related to sports media?
Yeah, I mean, not a ton in high school. I volunteered at my high school's like television studio doing stuff like that to kind of just really get an introduction to everything. I think the big first step for me was in high school. I started working for the Wizards as a locker room attendant or ball boy, as people are known for. And that really came a lot out of luck, honestly. I remember reading a Sports Illustrated for Kids article where they interviewed a ball boy at the time, and he was explaining how, hey, he goes to every single game and sits courtside and is in the locker room and is helping players and all that stuff. And I was
Sick.
like, I think at the time I was 12. And I remember reading, I was like, this is the coolest job ever. I, get paid to go sit courtside at NBA games. Sign me up. So I wrote a letter to the Washington Wizards, and a couple months later, I ended up getting a call from their equipment manager. And he thanked me for my letter, but he explained that you had to be 16 to work for the team at that time. So when I was 16, I think I must have called the number that he provided on that letter. They brought me in for an interview. Interview process was kind of funny because I just had to rebound some basketballs, I guess, to make sure I was athletic. And then they did do a short little interview. And then they hired me on the spot, which was fantastic. It was a huge learning experience for me just because at a young age I got very comfortable being around athletes, which I think is a valuable asset at this point. And then also I was just around tons of media, just because the amount of cameras and writers that are around basketball games helped me really understand what the media landscape looked like.
Did that kind of like shape your mindset from, let's say, school? Because I feel like a lot of kids in high school are more focused on getting good grades because that's kind of what gets you into college. But did the experience have more of an impact on your high school brain?
I think so. I mean, obviously, grades and my SAT scores were still a very high priority for me because I was targeting Maryland from day one because I knew that they had a good journalism program. I was a huge sports fan, obviously, in Maryland had a really good basketball team and actually football team at the time, which they no longer have. Their football team is terrible. So that's kind of I knew where I wanted to go. I was still aiming for that and working hard in school. But yeah, I mean, having the job with the Wizards, I knew I had somewhat of a leg up and at least an in for once I got into college and started doing internships. Just the fact that I had the job with the Wizards already on there. And I knew, hey, if I can get through the next 4 years in college and add, 4 or 5 more interesting or at least diverse jobs in the space, then by the time I graduate, I could put my resume against anybody else.
That just goes to show you kind of like taking advantage of any opportunity because if you think about it, if you never took advantage of that opportunity to go with the Wizards, I don't think, to be honest, that you would have ended up in this spot because, as you said, you learned so many life experiences that helped you in the long run, like being comfortable around athletes, around cameras, around like the journalism space, and around professional sports in general. So, I mean, that just goes to show you, even though like some people will not go up on and take advantage of a job like being a ball boy because I don't know, they might think they're too good for that or something like that. But I feel like taking advantage of it is kind of what set you up perfectly for your career path in the future, right?
Yeah, and I mean, let me give you exact example of that. I'm sure you've talked to other individuals that say, "Hey, marketing yourself or networking is just a key to going where you want to in your career, or making connections are so important." And it's so true. And it kind of fell in my lap as I began working with the Wizards. One of the equipment managers was there, was like, "Hey, you go to Maryland, for broadcast journalism, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh, I'm friends with a producer that works at a radio station for this. It was this show called Sports Junkies, and they're actually still on the air now in DC." And he's like, "Yeah, like, do you want to intern for that?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm looking for internships. This is my freshman year in college. So I really hadn't got my foot in the door outside of the Wizards working other places." And so that job that I had when I was 16 led to my very first internship when I was 19. And then having those two things on my resume, competing against other 19-year-old freshmen or, by the next year, 20-year-old sophomores, I knew that I already had two pretty good things on my resume and just kept building from there. So yeah, that first foot in the door and then never knowing where that'll take you or who that'll lead to connection wise, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and like before you became a ball boy for the Wizards, were you like kind of just exploring different career paths that you could go into, or were you just like only sports focused?
I was definitely sports focused. I mean, I did little things like worked in restaurants and stuff like that just
Yeah.
to have some kind of job. I knew that wouldn't be like a long-term career thing or anything. I think my focus on what my career could possibly really began later on in high school, junior year, senior year, and I already started working with the Wizards at that point.
Yeah, you had a really cool experience, definitely, in your high school life. But now shifting into college, you transferred your curiosity and energy from high school to the University of Maryland, where you majored in broadcast journalism. But you weren't just going to school; you were also doing internships, like
Mhm.
interning for ESPN on the show Around the Horn, or being a Wizards ball boy in 2000, and even interning at a radio station. Do you feel like your GPA mattered more than the real world experiences? Because a lot of college students now focus heavily on their GPA.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. And I think both are certainly important. But since I've been in the real world and you know, working as a producer here at Films, I think the experience that I got from my internships and doing the actual jobs, or at least jobs that are similar to what I'm doing now, probably did teach me more and prepare me more for what my career actually is. When I think back on college, and I had a good GPA. It certainly wasn't perfect or anything, but certainly was good. I think what it was great for was kind of trying different things. I did a bunch of, live hits from certain places. I actually did play by play for certain sports like women's basketball. I was traveling with them as their play by play announcer. So I think that was cool. But certainly the internships I was able to do in college, like you mentioned the Around the Horn internship, which I got to see how they put on a television show, which is completely different than radio, or another internship I did, I worked for a freelance company. So I think it just allowed me to see different parts of the business to kind of narrow in on what exactly I wanted to do once I graduated.
I mean, you had so many cool experiences in the sports industry, but if you had to pick one moment or internship that really made you feel like, wow, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to pursue in my future, what would that be?
Yeah, so it's funny, and when you ask that, I'm almost contradicting myself because I'm not even going to one of my internships. I'm going back to a college class that I had. I think it was my junior year. There was a documentary class that I had at Maryland. The main thing of the whole semester was we got partnered up with two other individuals, and you just had a project of during this semester make a documentary about any topic you want to.
So
And we
cool.
chose to do one on three female boxers in the DC area that we found, that are different stages of success. And it really was my first chance, aside from, like I mentioned, my friends or cousins making silly movies when we're 12, like to really just, hey, take a film, you have to make it yourself, make it good, and then we showed it in front of the class at the end. And I think just going through that experience was a huge learning experience, but it also really solidified, like, hey, this is, I don't want to be in front of the camera anymore. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to make documentaries.
Shifting back to that time after graduation, like right before you started NFL Films, I feel like a lot of students would be really scared or like freaking out if they don't have something lined up right after college. So, what advice would you give to them if they didn't have something right after college that they wanted to do?
Yeah, I think the main thing is just keep trying, keep a positive attitude. Remember what your end goal is essentially. What kind of job you want to be doing, what things you enjoy doing, I think. Like I was saying, because if you end up in a position where you're miserable going in every single day, I think that's going to affect your work. So for me, the main thing was, I think when I graduated, I had a bunch of resumes out to places. I was getting some feedback. I think at that point, I still was taking a shot at trying to be on air. I had actually made up some audition tapes, that consisted of some of the news packages that I did back in college, and I was sending them out to places all over the place. And I think it was almost a blessing in disguise that I didn't get a hit anywhere, because it almost just took some time, and then eventually I heard back from NFL Films, just because they really only hire at two different times of the calendar year, so it just happened not to sync up right when I graduated. So that's the main thing. I mean, I think being open-minded, being willing to try different opportunities, and know that, hey, maybe if it's not for me, you know, not being afraid to move on to the next thing. But I think the main thing of just having a targeted goal of what you want to do and knowing what you want to do will help.
Yeah, for sure. And now look, fast forward to now, right? You're a senior producer at NFL Films. You've been working for 19 years, so you have all that experience. You've worked on some big shows like Hard Knocks, Quarterback, Receivers, and many other shows as well, I'm sure. You're working with some pretty high profile people with some pretty strong reputations that they have to keep. And in your bio, you did mention that, gaining the trust to tell these athletes' stories is both the good and the bad is one of the best feelings of your job. So how do you gain the trust of these people to, be able to tell their story without maybe them rejecting the idea of you being able to tell
Sure.
it?
I think being at NFL Films, that gives me somewhat of a little bit of an advantage compared to some other places, because NFL Films kind of has a 60-year built-in relationship with a lot of these clubs, and 60 years of trust just from the stories that they've told from when they first started. So that helps us, I think, going in for sure. They know what we're going in, but at the end of the day, it is still just all about trust, and it is about relationship building. And that is certainly one of the biggest challenges, because you're going into someone's living room and you're expecting them to kind of spill their heart to you, um, when they've really never met you before, or at the end of maybe only 3 or 4 shoots, like you might really only be with them for a couple days total together. But I think that's why you kind of have to kind of pull back any shield that might be between you guys and let them know about you as a person. That's why I try to share as much as I can, like about, hey, I have 3 kids, or, I like this team, or this is where I'm from, so they can kind of get to know me as well. Because anytime I do an interview, it's so much better if it feels like it's more of just a casual conversation than me reading questions and them just giving answers. I think that's how you get the best way of breaking them out of the press conference mode, which we're so used to seeing them give the same cliches over and over. Before we start a big project like a quarterback or one of those, I try to fly down there and just have lunch with them or have a conversation with them, so I can get to know them, they can get to know me, and then once we actually start rolling the cameras, then it's just comfortable from there on out.
You're making me love this job more and more.
Yeah.
Building those relationships are really important with the players because if they don't have your trust, then they might just keep lying throughout the whole show. So it's really
For
important
sure.
to build the relationships.
Yeah, and like I was saying, because if they don't believe that that final product is going to actually be the story that they want to tell or the true story about who they are, then they're just going to have that front on the entire time and just kind of treat you like a post-game press conference and give you these canned answers, which don't allow you to really peel back any layers from them.
Do you
Yeah.
feel like your job is kind of like a team sport like football, or do you feel like it's kind of a solo job?
No, it's definitely a team sport, 100%. And that's why like NFL Films is so great. It is very different in other places. And it's a little bit of both in the way that as a producer, I kind of get to have my hand in everything. So I get to sit down and lay out what the whole film would look like, what number of shoots I want to do with, what I want the interviews to look like, who else I want to interview for it. And then I get to actually go out, direct the shoots, and then I get the footage back. I do all the editing myself. Obviously, other people would help. I pick the music, I write the scripts, and then we even see it through the post production. So, a lot of places they would have different people doing those different jobs, but here you can kind of have your hand in everything. However, it's definitely not just a one man thing because we have, 6 or 7 cinematographers in house that work with us at NFL Films. And then we have a ton of other freelance guys that shoot for us all over the country. So, it is certainly a massive, massive team effort with maybe, me or the other producers in my role, maybe being the quarterback of that team essentially.
For sure.
That's a
And
lot of people.
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Well, it's great. It's awesome resources. So like if I had to do everything by myself, there's no way I'd be able to finish a film in
that'd be
time just
really tough.
because there's so many different aspects of it.
Yeah, and also on the topic of teams, you worked on Hard Knocks with all these different teams, and that's a lot of people that you're covering and a lot of different other people that you're managing in terms of the production. So, I mean, what do you think is the most underrated leadership skill when it comes to managing all these different personalities, people, and things like that?
I think it's communication, like easily communication. I mean, when everybody feels like they know what the purpose of a certain shoot or what the goal of the day is, then they all feel part of it. And I'll kind of lay out what I'm thinking for the day, but it's an open discussion of, hey, if you guys have any ideas of, you know, what did you see at practice yesterday? This random guy that we had no idea was a good character. All of a sudden, maybe he was really funny during practice. And I rely on other people being able to tell me that. So, hey, let's start following him. Maybe he could be a great character to follow on our show. So, yeah, I think just with the crew, certainly communication. And that's the same thing with the team. And the main thing I tell teams and players when we do films is kind of like, hey, I want to do this film with you. I don't want to do it about you. And I think that helps them feel like they're part of the process rather than they're just kind of here, we're filming everything and then
Yeah.
they don't trust us essentially because we're an outside guy. So it's kind of like make it more of a partnership.
Yeah, and you're working with these big people, big famous people actually. So, was there ever a point where it was kind of overwhelming to the point where you thought maybe I can't handle all this, or did you have that mindset of I can do anything I put my mind to as long as I work hard at it?
I think like I was saying, being around those athletes at a young age certainly helped me. I timed out my ball boy years with the Wizards pretty great. Where the second year I was there, Michael Jordan came back to
Oh
basketball, was
my,
playing with
that's
the Wizards
sick.
for 2 years. Yeah, which was incredible. But that was my first time. I remember seeing him for the first time walking down the hallway. He was coming down, and I was coming down the other way where like I was just like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. I think I needed to say something to him because I think pretty much every single game, somebody from the other team, the visiting team, would always ask for a pair of Jordan shoes, like after the game. So that actually ended up working out great for me because it gave me a reason that I had to interact with them a little bit. But I remember the first time I had to ask him, I was so nervous and just like stumbled over my words and stuff like that. So I think getting through that year of being really awkward, I'm sure, towards him and really nervous, I think helped me on to now at this point. I haven't had as many of those. Like I interviewed Patrick Mahomes for the first time a couple years ago,
Oh, nice.
and I was completely comfortable. So I think that's kind of the nice thing. There's not many rooms that I get nervous about unless I've heard, a certain coach or something is super intimidating, and maybe I could be a little nervous going in that. But I feel like I've had enough interactions at this point. I could hold my own.
Yeah, would you kinda consider yourself a veteran in the industry at this point, to the point where you're not really nervous about anybody really?
I think so. I'd say I still feel young, but yeah, when you say 19 years, I guess yeah, I'd consider myself a veteran at this point.
At least you're not 20 yet.
Yep.
May well,
Yep, it's coming
Actually,
though, around the corner.
yeah. Yeah, our dad loves talking about how storytelling is one of the most important
Mhm.
parts of life because he's a really big storyteller. Like he loves telling stories. He could talk for hours about one small thing that happened in his life. But I feel like that's a really important aspect too in your industry because you have to talk to those players and you have to communicate them over to your team so you could tell those stories through those films, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that too is, you know, doing your background homework and, really understanding that you have to be prepared before you go into stuff like this. I mean, obviously you want to research, before I go into Justin Jefferson's house, I want to make sure I know, who all of his family members are and, his background and his high school stories and all that stuff. So when he starts bringing stuff up, I feel prepared to have a response. You really want to have a plan, almost as down to every detail as you can. And even if a plan gets messed up, that's when just be able to think on the fly, but at least you had that original plan and that'll kind of make you feel more confident in the moment when you do need to adjust. And like I was saying, I think that took me a little bit to understand. And then my first couple years of NFL films, I really started understanding that. And then every shoot from here on out went way better after I understood. Like if you know what you need going into it, everything's going to go smooth.
Yeah, and in your current career and you're working for NFL Films, your job seems pretty spontaneous from what I'm hearing. I mean, you could have some random comment come out of left field and just surprise you with whatever somebody says, but what is the most surprising thing that would be surprising to a high schooler about what you do?
Yeah, I think what you were onto it right there, just the spontaneity of it and really having to be able to think on your feet. There's a quote that we use around the building when we talk about Hard Knocks, where essentially Steve Sable, who created NFL Films with his dad, Ed Sable, he used to say when asked about Hard Knocks that it was essentially like assembling an airplane mid-flight because you have to have the flexibility because going into this show you have no idea what is going to happen. Obviously you're telling the story of a team in training camp, and going in we might know a couple characters that we think we want to follow that might be interesting, but all of a sudden you have this undrafted rookie who shows up and catches 2 touchdowns the first preseason game and he becomes the biggest star of the show. So I think just being able to be flexible, being able to think on your feet, being able to adapt, and really having that creative approach to everything, even in the moment, is just so important in this job.
Yeah, when you guys were doing Hard Knocks with the Dolphins, when I watched the episodes, as there were more episodes, you guys started focused on Christian Wilkins more because he was basically the funniest guy there. I remember watching it would be Christian Wilkins was mic'd up every single episode when they were playing the games and he was just telling jokes the whole time. That's what really interested me in those episodes.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I'm trying to think my first year that I was director was the Browns year, and we had two individuals that really weren't on our radar. There was this tight end, Devin Kajus, who we were just at practice and we heard him kind of like making jokes nonstop or, everyone talking about how funny he is. So we started following him. And then we find out that he's really into crystals and just like odd, little stuff, like, little quirks. He walks around the facility barefoot and stuff like that, and we're just like, okay, this is interesting. And he ends up being like the big star of that show. And then this other guy was their offensive line coach, Bob Wiley, and it was for something really silly where we had, like you were talking about, being a team and working together. Was we had a camera guy that came to us, was like, hey, I was filming the offensive line coach, and every single time he says, "Set hut," to guys get going, like his big belly like goes up and
Oh,
down.
I've seen that
And
clip.
right. So it's something that no one would ever really think of. But then all of a sudden it was like, okay, all right, let's put a couple cameras on him, through the next practices and see if he does it. And all of a sudden, when you edit 5 of those together, it's like a hilarious little thing. And he took off and went viral after that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, all the
you
time.
really have to work as a team, and just you never know when something really cool is going to fall into your lap.
Yeah, that's pretty funny actually, because I remember, I think it was just a couple of days ago, I just saw it on my phone, and I started laughing so hard because every time there's just his belly would just go up and then back down, and it was like
It's
it was
amazing.
hilarious.
It's great. And like that's,
Those little observations that you have to make.
yeah, you can't plan for stuff like that. It just happens. And that's what's great about this.
Yeah, for sure. Alright, so if there was one lesson from Gaithersburg, Maryland, all the way to today working at NFL Films, what is one lesson that you hope every student watching will take away from this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I already hit on networking. I think one thing that I wish, honestly, if I could have gone back and told myself, a piece of advice at 16, 17 years old that wants to go in this industry for sure, is to write more. I mean, I think that is such a valuable skill that a lot of people don't have right now. And the ones that do are extremely valuable, especially around this building. Like we have two people, really, it comes down to two producers in this building that are above and beyond better writers than anybody else. And for every project we have, like the Hard Knocks, those guys are the ones, specifically one, Jerry Reimel, who we hired just to write that show. The producers will write rough scripts and then he'll come in and polish it and make it 1,000 times better. I wish I knew how to write how he does, because I mean, just how he uses words are amazing. So, and I think that's a skill that can be easily improved on just by writing, writing, writing. And in addition, just a skill being better as you get older. Like I was saying before, I think it'll help you find your voice as well. Kind of the stories you enjoy telling, it'll give you more reps at it and help you in the long run.
I feel like reading is also important
For
for
sure.
that writing aspect because you kind of have to build that vocabulary and imagination skills for that, right?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Maybe I should start doing my reading logs for school.
Exactly. Get on it right now. I expect 5 essays by next week.
I got it. I got it.
All right, so there's one final question we like to ask our guests before we end our episodes, and that is, what is your definition of success and how has it changed from your high school days to today?
Yeah. I mean, I think when I think about, you know, 20 years or whenever I'm able to retire from here, I think if I could look back on some of the projects I've worked on and they still are relevant, or at least they still hold up, I think I'll be proud of that. I think what's cool, and it took me a while to realize, I did a documentary on Michael Vick probably,
Nice.
ooh, gosh, 10 years ago at this point, a Football Life episode on Michael Vick. And when I was speaking to an older producer, just brainstorming some ideas, and, he was like, hey, you got to realize, like, this is going to be the film on Michael Vick, like, people will watch for years. And I think sometimes I lose that thought or kind of forget it, like 10, 20 years from now, when someone who doesn't know who Michael Vick is and they Google him, like that film will come up and that will teach generations about who that person was, just not as a player, but also as a person. And I think that's pretty cool. So if I'm able to do that, we'll say five different films that I've been part of, whether directing or editing or at least some hand in doing something with, I think that'll be success in my eyes.
It's a great definition of
Yeah.
success.
That lasting impact.
Yeah.
I like it.
So we always give a chance for our guests to give us some questions for us to answer. So do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, what do you guys enjoy right now as you're beginning your process of trying to go into the media industry?
So I'm starting to enjoy editing these videos in my time because it it just like makes me calmer. I don't know really how to explain it. The vibe just hits different, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, this podcast is kind of like the way that we're kind of breaking into the media world and kind of understanding all the different things that go into it as far as preparation and, as you said, kind of feeling comfortable with everybody. And I think that's really helping me in terms of building like professionally.
For me, I would say because I'm in charge of the social media, it gives me like a better understanding of what the social media world is like. So for the future, I can understand like what to post, when to post, and all that.
No, I love that. Sounds like you guys are all trying different parts of it and
Yeah.
starting to navigate towards that. So that's great. It makes you guys a good team too, I think.
Yep.
Thank you.
I actually have a question for you.
Sure.
So it's just us four, okay? Nobody else is listening. Can you tell us if there's another receivers or quarterbacks, or even if you're gonna make a running back show?
I think it would be really good if there's another one coming out, but I can't say either way.
Yeah,
Oh
good answer.
man.
But if there was one, I think yeah, it might. I think they typically come out in July, so I would look out for something at that point, possibly.
All
All
right,
right.
cool.
And who is your favorite athlete that you have interviewed or had on a show that you have not mentioned on this episode?
I can't remember if I brought up Kirk's name or not. It's a little bit of a recency bias, but I spent 2 seasons with Kirk Cousins. The first season of quarterback, and then it was actually cool because when they approached him to do the second season, he said that he would only do it if I was the director with him, which I took as a
That's
huge,
great.
feather in my cap because I must have done something right if he wanted to do it again and only wanted to do it with me. And I think just when you spend 2 years with somebody, you kind of get to know them on a different level. And obviously, I spent a ton of time around his wife, Julie, and his two kids, Cooper and Turner, as well. So I think Kirk will always have a special place in my heart. I think it's hard, unless I spend 3 years with somebody else. I think that'd be hard to jump him.
Yeah, I love the clips on the shows where it's like him going to great clips and then showing how amazing that place is.
See, and that's the great thing about Kirk. Like he just got it. He understood. Like we're just trying to show who you really are, and he really was just such an open book with us. And any ideas that I had, he was open to, and then he went out of his way to provide me a list of like, hey, here's all these things that we could film, like you let me know what would be good. So when talent or a character that you're working with is so open like that, it just makes everything so much easier because you don't have to bring everything to them and you can kind of work together to tell their story.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on this podcast. It was really great to have you.
Of
We loved
course.
hearing about your story.
Anytime. I had a great time.
You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Threads, Facebook, everywhere. We are the Future 3 Podcast, and we out. Peace.
Peace.